Right, to the US now, where President Joe Biden believes the Democrats had a strong midterm election, even as the balance of power in the Congress is still to be decided. Both the House of Representatives and the Senate have yet to be declared, although Republicans still have the advantage in regaining control of at least the lower house, while the overall Senate results are still too close to call. Briefing the media late on Wednesday, Biden said his party lost fewer seats in the House than previous Democratic presidents at their first midterm elections. He says this feat is unmatched in the last 4 decades, signaling that he was ready to work with Republicans no matter what happened.
With the repudiation of the party in power not materializing to the extent expected given the unfavorable history of midterm elections to the governing party, President Biden calling it a good day for democracy and a good day for America.
Our democracy has been tested in recent years, but with their votes, the American people have spoken and proven once again that democracy is who we are. The states across the country saw a record voter turnout, and the heart and soul of our democracy, the voters, the poll workers, the election officials, they did their job and they fulfilled their duty. And apparently without much interference at all, without any interference, it looks like. And that's a testament, I think, to the American people. While we don't know all the results yet, at least I don't know them all yet, here's what we do know. While the press and the pundits are predicting a giant red wave, it didn't happen. And I know you were somewhat miffed by my obsessive optimism, but I felt good during the whole process.
White House officials have expressed a sense of vindication that Democrats did better than expected after Biden focused his campaign pitch largely on preventing threats to U.S. democracy, securing abortion rights, and extolling his economic policies in a climate of high dissatisfaction with the state of the U.S. economy and rising crime.
Democrats had a strong night, and we lost fewer seats in the House of Representatives than any Democratic president's first midterm election in the last 40 years. And we had the best midterm for governors since 1986. And another thing that we know is that voters spoke clearly about their concerns, about raising costs, the rising costs that they're in, and the need to get inflation down. There's still a lot of people hurting. They're very concerned. And it's about crime and public safety. And they sent a clear and unmistakable message that they want to preserve our democracy and protect the right to choose in this country.
Biden signaled a renewed willingness to work with Republicans, particularly in the context of the opposition party regaining the majority in at least one of the 2 legislative arenas.
When I return from the G20 meetings in Indonesia with other world leaders, I'm going to invite the leaders of both political parties, as I've done in the past in my foreign trips, to the White House to discuss how we can work together for the remainder of this year and into the next Congress.
With a final determination on which party controls what, hours, if not days or weeks away, due to outstanding mail-in ballots. The magic majority number for control of the House of Representatives is 218, and Republicans are closer to that than their Democratic opponents. But any majority will be slim given the trajectory we are seeing. In the Senate, things are even tighter, with 51 seats required for a majority. Republicans currently at 49 and Democrats at 48, with races yet to be called in Nevada and Arizona, while the Georgia Senate race heads to a runoff in December. So, get the popcorn. This could take a while. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
All right, for the latest on this, the U.S. midterm election results, we're joined now by SABC News Correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease. So, Sherwin, we do indeed have the popcorn out. So there's 2 states that we're looking at, Nevada and Arizona. Just how tight is that race at the moment? And do we get a bit of extra butter?
And extra caramel on the top. That's my favorite, Pease. So look, I mean, there are 3 outstanding Senate races in the United States that will determine which party controls the upper house in the United States Congress. The first one is in Georgia, right? We didn't mention Georgia there, but Georgia has gone to a runoff because neither Senate candidate, Raphael Warnock, the Democratic incumbent, and Herschel Walker, the Trump-nominated former football star, failed to get, both of them failed to get above 50%, which is the threshold for victory in the state of Georgia. So they go to a runoff in early December. So we're going to wait for that one. In Arizona and Nevada, those are the ones that will be decided in the days ahead. In Nevada, you have the Democratic incumbent Senator Catherine Cortez Masto with 48% of the vote so far. Adam Laxalt, her Republican opponent, 49% of the vote. 89% of precincts in Nevada are reporting now to SABC, and we understand the outstanding votes to come in are mail-in ballot votes, voting by mail. And voting by mail in the United States tends to favor Democrats. So, yes, there's an advantage to the Republican candidate there, but the Democratic candidate continues to close the gap. In Arizona, Mark Kelly, the Democratic incumbent, who essentially replaced former Senator John McCain in that seat, is at 51%. His Republican opponent, Blake Masters, at 46%, 70% of precincts in Arizona are reporting. Again, the outstanding number of ballots, we told in Arizona, over 100,000, tens of thousands actually of votes still to come in, and mail by vote, or voting by mail, tends to favor Democrats. So it's advantaged Democrats in both those races, but of course that is mere speculation, SABC, because the final tallies will be known once all those ballots are counted. Why is this process taking so long? Because essentially on election day, if you go in person to cast your ballot, it's quite a detailed process, a lot of different senatorial races, governor's races, congressional races, local state assembly races. So it's a big document that is then fed into a tabulation, an electronic tabulation machine. So if you are essentially not there in person to insert your ballot into the tabulation machine, that then has to be done by someone else if you voted by mail. So essentially people are opening up envelopes, verifying signatures, unfolding the ballot, placing them in a pile so that those piles can then be taken to those electronic tabulation machines and physically and manually inserted. So that is a process if you're talking about 500,000, 600,000 mail-in ballots. So that's what the process that we're seeing now, the delay that we're seeing now that is unfolding. And in terms of those states' election laws, you can post your ballot on the day of election. So as long as you have a postmark that says November 8th, that ballot can be counted even if it arrives at the polling station or the counting venue 7 days after election day. So we're looking at into the weekend, maybe early next week, when we might finally get to the end of this process, depending on how quickly those election workers can process those envelopes of mailing ballots and feed them into the machine so that everything can be counted. That's why we don't know what's going on in Nevada and in Arizona.
And I must say, Sherwin, that I've generally found the midterms quite complex in themselves. It was interesting to hear President Biden yesterday talk about the youth and why he believes because of them that the big red wave didn't materialize. But the Republicans, as of today, as you say, are still favored to regain the majority in the House of Representatives. But what are the implications, particularly of a Democratic White House and a Republican-led Congress, be that in the House, Senate, or both?
You know, it's a piece that we can't emphasize enough how well Democrats did in these midterm elections. Essentially, midterm elections are seen as a referendum on the party in power. Democrats have control of the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the White House. So this really was billed as a referendum on the policies of President Joe Biden over the last 2 years. My colleague Aaron Berger was telling me earlier that this midterm election feels like it's actually a referendum on the Republicans. And the reason for that is that if you look at some of the indicators before we went into this poll, things like record high inflation, the highest inflation in 40 years, the economy the top of the agenda, a bigger agenda item for voters. Things like rising crime, particularly in places like blue New York. A number of blue congressional seats have been turned red in upstate New York because of issues like spiraling crime. But Democrats pushed back to peace, so with issues around the federal access to abortion. You'll remember that Supreme Court decision earlier this year that really spurred women to the polls in terms of fighting for abortion in this country. They also talked to Democrats about putting democracy on the ballot. They feel that there is an erosion of American democracy, particularly in light of claims from MAGA Republicans, no less the former President Donald Trump, that talk about election integrity, cast aspersions on the voting process in 2020. Said that if there are delays in places like Arizona and Nevada, that's probably fraud. And so you've seen a counterpoint from the electorate, and that's what President Biden is talking about, the lack of a red wave. You see pushback from voters in terms of these mythical statements that come from the right in terms of election fraud when there's no evidence to back it up. So, the economy and inflation and crime didn't deliver what Republicans thought they were, were going to expect in terms of victories here because of that pushback. Jessica Levinson at SABC is a constitutional law professor at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. This is what she had to say.
So if Republicans gain a majority in, let's say, just the House, obviously that would stall out President Biden's legislative agenda, but it would also mean that all of the committees will be obviously controlled by Republicans. They will start investigations. They'll investigate the president. They'll investigate the president's son. They'll investigate the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. They'll investigate what's happening in the Ukraine. So I think we're going to see at least 2 years of all of these. Frankly, I view them as politically motivated investigations, not a lot of legislation. I think hope for compromise is essentially out the window.
So it's essentially, if Republicans do gain the majority, if only in one chamber, so a lot of gridlock, a lot of political fights to be expected in the months and years ahead, no doubt.
And as you mentioned, Sherwin, that things didn't quite go the way the Republican Party had expected, because typically it's viewed that midterms would favor them in opposition to the presidency. So what kind of navel gazing are they going to do in terms of what has cost them this predicted red wave, the failure thereof, and what was the role of Donald Trump in all of this?
Let me read you a headline from the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal is part of the conservative media clique in the United States, owned by the Murdochs. They own Fox News and the like, the New York Post. This is what the Wall Street Journal editorial board says. Trump is the Republican Party's biggest loser. That's the headline. What will Democrats do when Donald Trump isn't around to lose elections? We have to wonder, because on Tuesday, Democrats succeeded again in making the former president a central campaign issue, and Trump helped them do it. We are hearing that behind those closed doors, Republican allies of the former president are being very critical about his messaging during this election, his narrative during this election, his flirtation with running for a third term. And if you look at how well the Republican governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, did, essentially winning almost 60% of the vote against his Democratic challengers, 60 to 40%. That is a blowout victory. And he is now being touted in conservative circles as being, the replacement Trump, in a sense, that he now is being touted as someone that can take what he did in Florida onto a national platform. Here's the problem. Donald Trump isn't about to go away. He's talking about announcing for a third term come November 15th, as soon as November 15th. And that has implications for the Senate race in Georgia that is only going to be happening on around December 6th. And Republicans really want to gain that majority in the Senate. So the role of the president here is being criticized from within his own party. The question is, are Republican elites, certainly the Mitch McConnells that lead Republicans in the Senate, Kevin McCarthy, that is the minority leader currently in the House, who wants to be Speaker of the House, do they buck the trend and leave Trump on the sidelines, or is he just too big a factor in the Republican Party, given the groundswell of support that he still enjoys? Is he just still too important for them to cast aside? And that's really a big debate that the Republicans are having internally right now.
All right, Sherwin, let's leave it there with you, but thank you very much. I'm sure a long working weekend for you and the colleagues there in the US. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, our correspondent out in New York. Of course, we'll continue speaking to him about those midterm results.